This is Econo Chat. Let's talk business with Mr. Daniel Steinman. I am Elspeth Mngani, your hostess. A warm welcome to everyone tuned in right now. Today we are exploring oil and gas. Yet another topic that, we cannot stop talking about. There's also a lot of doubt, a lot of questions after the announcement of Shell last year, 2024. So there's a lot of confusion, Mr. Daniel Steinman, on what is really happening right now in terms of Namibia's oil and gas.
Well, Elspeth, can I send an open invitation? If any of the listeners know what's happening, will they please let me know? Because the people who are supposed to know don't know.
Yes.
Elspeth, why I suggested that we talk about oil and gas is because I'm trying to remove that irrational element from the discussion.
Yes.
And I want to point out to our listeners that a lot of this hype is built on expectation and on sentiment.
Yes.
And now you need to think back 2 years or so to September 2022, when it was announced that we made this major oil discoveries for the first time in 34 years, that the oil majors, when we talk about the oil major, it's a big oil company.
Yes.
The Shell, Texaco, BP, those sort of players. When they started first exploring for oil in Namibia, that this was the first successful wells that they drilled, and we got this hype. The results created an enormous hype, out of all perspective, out of all balance, and the popular figure that was thrown around was 2 billion barrels a day. Now, 2 billion barrels a day is a lot of oil.
It's a lot.
To process that, you need a whole vast chain of infrastructure.
Yes.
It just doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot of things that need to happen. But 2 years later, or fast forward 2 years and 2 months later, and now suddenly Shell came with this so-called write-down announcement, and the sentiment has moved across the spectrum from outrageously positive to depressingly negative.
Very depressing.
And this is what is, I don't want to call it nonsense, but in a sense it's nonsense. It's overreaction by people who don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And this is why I told you, let's address the irrational element in the whole oil and gas discussion. So if we had this estimate of 2 billion barrels a day 2.5 years ago, on what was it based? On 3 wells? Maybe 4 wells? On relatively shallow water wells? It was a completely unfounded type of figure. It's a sort of thing that people just throw around for marketing reasons. It was not based on any empirical fact. And you can think for yourself, if you talking an area in the sea that is about 50,000 square kilometers, that's a huge area.
Yeah.
The area that is currently under exploration is more or less the same size as the Umoeke region. Now again, I'm using this to give the listener a perspective in his own mind, that he understands he or she that they understand the picture. So if you would explore in those very difficult conditions out in the ocean, in an area the size of the Umoeke region on land, and you drill 3 wells or 4 wells, Elspeth, how do you make an assessment of Umoeke with 3 holes in the ground?
Yeah. Just doesn't make
impossible.
sense. Yeah.
What you claim after that is nonsense. But and I'm critical. But the reason I'm critical is because suddenly the sentiment has changed, and now all of a sudden I read in very respectable publications, I read articles that says the Namibian exploration sun has set, end of the exploration horizon for us, and all that sort of thing. out of context, not based on fact. And a little bit later in our talk today, I'm going to come back to the technicalities so that we can also understand why is it so difficult to make an assessment. But to wrap this up, from 2 billion barrels a day, we are down to 200 million barrels per day. New estimate. Now it's based on 7 wells. Now again, in your own mind, unless you go stick that drill bit right into the source of the oil, you know, like when we drill for water, what we call aardwater, unless you there at 80 meters or 100 meters, when you get into that fissure between the rocks, you don't get any clear indication of what water you can get from a water well. Now it's the same with oil. You know, unless you go drop that drill bit right smack into that oil pod, you don't really know what's happening 100 yards further, let alone 10 kilometers further or 100 kilometers further. And these are the distances, this is the size of the area that we're talking about. So again, this 200 million barrels a day is just as unfounded an estimate as 2 billion barrels. But the fact that the industry is now talking only 10% of what they punted 2 years ago gives you an indication of how difficult it is to make an empirical assessment.
Okay, so the question basically remains, how did they come up with these estimates? But that answer will probably be answered right after this short break.